So I recently wrapped up my playthrough of Assassin's Creed 2, and it's probably not a controversial opinion to say that this game excels in pretty much every aspect compared to its predecessor. The graphics, the combat, free running, the cities and environments, the music especially, oof, chef's kiss. It's all amazing, good job. But today I really wanted to highlight just how much Assassin's Creed 2 changed everything as a sequel, and to do that, I think the best place to start is with its story. Now, as a very quick disclaimer, in my last video, I mostly went through the story beats of Assassin's Creed 1 with both the Altair and Desmond plots. And while I will be discussing both Ezio and Desmond in this video and drawing comparisons to the previous title, I'm going to assume that we've all played this 13-year-old game, and I'm just going to cover my main takeaways rather than breaking down the story. So yeah, this definitely won't be an in-depth critique or anything, but mainly just my thoughts and maybe a segment at the end of a couple of things that I noticed while playing the game. Alright, so with that out of the way, the story. So we start Ezio's adventure quite literally from his birth and witness the key moments of his adolescence before his father and brothers are betrayed and murdered. This event throws Ezio into the world of Assassins vs Templars, and already this makes for a significantly better and engaging narrative compared to Assassin's Creed 1. This traumatic event reunites Ezio and his remaining family with his uncle Mario at the
Monteriggioni
villa. This is where Ezio will train in the assassin ways and embark on a quest of revenge, initially focusing on taking those out immediately involved in the death and betrayal of his father and brothers. Ezio eventually realizes that the web of conspirators actually spans much larger, and this takes him across various cities in 15th century Italy. I've probably played this game at least 5 or 6 times over the years, but playing it again recently with the mindset of trying to take down notes for a video has given me a new appreciation for the story. Like, I know the Assassin's Creed games over the years have had their ups and downs, but I remember this being the first actual Assassin's Creed game I played, and going through the story for the first time is a memory I'll always cherish. But as an actual narrative compared to the first game, Assassin's Creed 2 is just leagues ahead with trying to engage its audience in my opinion. And this is noticeable for 2 main reasons for me. The first is its main protagonist, Ezio Auditore. He's just oozing with personality and charisma from the moment he's on the screen. He's constantly throwing banter back and forth with his family and friends. He's playful, but he shows a great deal of respect. Ubisoft has made a main character that just isn't a piece of shit. Like, yeah, sure, it's compelling when a character we believe to be an absolute asshole just ends up learning from their mistakes and grows. Kind of like Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones if we just ignore the last 2 seasons because, yeah, they don't exist. But with the Ezio storyline, it depicts a decent person who has external pressures thrown at him constantly, but he shows his resilience and quality. And this is actually the second main reason why I find this game far more engaging than Assassin's Creed 1. With Altair, his hero's journey was overcoming the shortfall of his arrogance and overconfidence in himself. However, with Ezio, he has to overcome his family tragedy while being thrown into this secret world of Assassins vs Templars in order to protect what family he has left, while also avenging his father and brothers. And with this compelling plot, it actually had an effect on the gameplay that I didn't expect, and it started to stand out to me more around the middle of my playthrough. And this is the fact that I was far more forgiving of repetitive missions than the previous game. Like, yeah, sure, there's obvious things with all of these games that you can pick apart when looking through a skeptical magnifying glass, but Assassin's Creed 1 only had a few different mission types, and you have to essentially repeat that same mission cycle about 9 times until you've reached the end of the game. Whereas with Assassin's Creed 2, it feels like you never really know what the next mission is going to include, and this is strongly aided by the updated sequence story structure. So rather than going into a sandbox area and fulfilling your quota of side missions to reach your next boss fight, you're actually following a very linear story, and any free roaming or viewpoint synchronization is encouraged between missions. However, it isn't mandatory. What also helps is that there's additional missions to do in each city outside of the story, such as Templar Layers and Assassin's Tombs. They're fun little isolated missions where you'll generally enter like a secret or restricted area and solve some puzzles in the form of free running or platforming. And these kind of feel like they're meant to be like the set piece missions of the title. If you complete all 6 Assassin's Tombs, you'll actually unlock Altair's armor as a reward, which is kind of like the OP endgame armor in Assassin's Creed 2, which funnily enough just doesn't look like anything Altair would have worn, but anyway. So if I was to summarize my overall thoughts on this game's storyline, is that it's a really strong plot carried by really strong and vibrant characters. Like, I genuinely got excited whenever Ezio was going to meet up with Leonardo da Vinci or make new friends in a different city. I also felt like a massive dick when I forgot to press a button during a cutscene and accidentally left Leonardo hanging when he went to give Ezio a hug. Which, by the way, also brings me to the updated cutscene structure in this game as well. In the previous title, there would be these cutscenes where there would be a DNA sequence glitch on the screen. And all this would provide would be a change of camera angle to make it look a little bit more cinematic. And I personally believe that this is Ubisoft's way of trying to make the audience feel more engaged with what was going on the screen. Whereas in this game, it actually affects something that would happen in the cutscene. So like I said before, I forgot to press a button during a cutscene and Leonardo didn't actually end up getting a hug reciprocated from Ezio. And you could just see the look of defeat on his face. It's actually crushing. But anyway, if there was anything I didn't like about the story, and it's pretty much my only complaint, it's that sequence 12 and 13 are just painful to play through. I know that in the original game you skip right to sequence 14, and these two sequences were just DLC, but seeing as I'm playing through the Ezio collection, I just can't skip them. And while it's cool that these sequences flesh out other side characters like Caterina Sforza, and also Ezio has this random, out of place yet inspiring speech at the end of sequence 13, it all just ultimately feels inconsequential. This probably isn't helped by the fact that at the end of sequence 11, Sean in the modern day tells Desmond and the gang that Rodrigo Borgia became Pope and that we're going straight to the Vatican. Like, even Desmond is chomping at the bit to just get back into the Animus and hunt down Rodrigo, but then it immediately takes us to Forlì and starts the side content of sequence 12. I don't know, it just kind of feels like the game is trying to add some padding for what I already felt like was a really greatly paced game. Like, I genuinely actually used to think that this game was really long. However, after playing Assassin's Creed 2 in 2022, in comparisons to modern RPGs, this game isn't bloated at all. Obviously, besides the inclusion of sequence 12 and 13, of course. But moving forward from the story though, I think this is a great time to cover off the game's setting and gameplay. So the shift to Renaissance Italy was a breath of fresh air in my opinion, as it wasn't a commonly depicted era in video games at the time, and it still might not be. While Assassin's Creed 2 features multiple cities, just like the previous entry, I feel that each destination actually feels much more unique in this game. Over the course of the story, Ezio travels between his home city of Florence, the warm and sunny
San Gimignano,
the dank wetlands of Forlì, and the massive city of Venice, featuring its famous canals. The distinctions between the cities aren't just the colour gradings and tones this time, but the actual map designs, and more specifically, the building designs. You can gallop across the open farmlands or climb the tall and narrow towers in Tuscany, or you can battle your way across the many industrial districts and tiny bridges in Venice. Which also neatly brings us along to the combat. While I don't actually think the combat systems have really changed a great deal in this game, I do believe that fighting enemies does feel a lot smoother. This also actually applies to free running and climbing as well. It feels a lot more accurate, so I thought I might just quickly mention it here. I do mostly play the classic counterattack method, which is a common feature in the first few AC titles. And while this combat feature might seem a little bit outdated, what I do appreciate is the new inventory additions. So from my understanding, the original Assassin's Creed marketed Altair to have a crossbow. And while that still isn't a feature until Brotherhood, Ezio does get himself kitted out with an actual fucking gun later in this game. It's super slow, but it's also kind of OP. He can also poison his enemies, throw knives, and throw down smoke bombs to provide cover while he's assassinating his enemies. Ezio also gets 2 hidden blades in this game, which is awesome, along with being able to visit doctors to buy medicine for healing, and visiting blacksmiths for new weapons and armor. This is just what I love about Assassin's Creed 2. It builds on the previous title in ways that weren't even present, like adding an in-game economy, shops, customization, and a really basic base builder feature in the
Monteregione
villa. But with these changes, it doesn't feel like the game is taking the series in an unnatural direction. As the saying goes, drip is temporary and swag is forever, and you can make Ezio look fresh in his wetlands ebony threads, all thanks to your local tailor. But you know who else needs some fresh threads? Sounds like an ad, it's not. Lucy. Like, what are you doing? You've been wearing the same blood-stained shirt the whole game. And also, I count 4 of us here in this room, and there's 1 bed. I shotgun being the little spoon. Anyway, let's cover the modern day just a tiny bit here. Sean and Rebecca are great additions to the game in my opinion. Lucy was fairly interesting in the first game, even if she still somehow has all of her fingers, which is also a thing in this game by the way. Like, how does she still have all of her fingers? Anyway, but I kind of feel like besides busting Desmond out of Abstergo, there's not much else that she adds to the plot, besides having a bit of tension with Desmond here and there and getting killed off in Brotherhood. Also remember that Sean and Rebecca always seem to be popping up in the future games outside the Ezio trilogy, but as mentioned before, I think they're a welcome fit and they breathe a bit of character into the modern day story. I really can't say the same for Desmond though. From what I see online, a lot of people just don't seem to like him that much, and I can kind of understand that. Like, I personally think that this game doesn't do as much for him as the other titles seem to, but I feel like he serves the purpose with being our viewpoint into this world, and he works for the game. The main story element Assassin's Creed 2 introduces with Desmond is that he's rapidly learning the combat skills of his ancestors from his time in the Animus. So rather than having to train in the real world for years to become an assassin, he can just master the actual required combat skills and agility just in a matter of weeks through the bleeding effect. He also provides like a pretty hefty smackdown to Vidic's men at the end of the game, and that's pretty cool. Oh yeah, that's right. Another thing, this game actually starts to show you a little bit more of Altair's life outside of the events of the first Assassin's Creed. I completely forgot about that until playing this game again. That being said though, it's not really that much. It kind of just shows that, he's climbing a little bit, he's chasing Maria, they get to the top of a tower, and then he performs a leap of faith. Is it explained in the game or somewhere online that he just does the leap of faith, but the camera just gets fixated on Maria and it just seems to zoom in on her belly? Is this to suggest that she's pregnant? Can someone let me know, please? Alright, moving swiftly along, here's the miscellaneous section of the video where I list the random notes that I took down while playing this game. Alright, first one. So the devs just clearly put a 15th century Florence backdrop to this room, and for some reason I only just noticed that with this playthrough. Anyway, the cutscenes. They're a lot more cinematic in this game, and rather than having a fixed camera and being able to toggle angles like the previous title, Ubisoft actually tried to go for more of a movie style, and I dig it. A great example of this is after you race your brother to the top of a tower and you see the game's title spread across the screen while the music swells and the two of them are just soaking in the city view. Also, I really got to give credit where credit's due. Eagle Vision walked in Assassin's Creed 1 so it could run in Assassin's Creed 2. Eagle Vision is just so much better in this game. It's like leagues ahead of Assassin's Creed 1. Now, after playing Assassin's Creed 1, the mission variety in this title is amazing. I mentioned the Templar layers in the Assassin's Tombs earlier, but there's also set-piece missions like soaring above Venice in Leonardo's flying machine to break into the palace, or trying to shake off enemies when racing through the mountains on a carriage. Also find that this game is really clever with introducing game mechanics, but masking it within the narrative of the missions. So for example, your mother asks you to accompany her to Leonardo's workshop, and in this mission you'll need to keep pace with the NPCs and carry supplies. This introduces similar mechanics of keeping in range of your target, whether it's escorting or tailing, but also shows you how to pick up items. This is a very simple example, but it's much better than having to suffer through an actual tutorial section like Assassin's Creed 1. It looks like I wrote down twice that Forley just looks fucking depressing, so I really mustn't have enjoyed this section of the game. But also, what is Katarina doing in the middle of this lake when you rescued her? Like, how did she actually get here? I really like how all of Sequence 9 is just dedicated to the Carnival, and it's mainly just a series of party games. And Ezio is clearly covered in drip by wearing a mask the whole sequence, which is really cool. You actually see this in the loading screens. It also kind of ties in the whole mission variety thing that I mentioned before. Like, there's a mission where you have to steal ribbons from people, and it's a very clever way of repurposing pickpocketing. Also, a couple of silly details. I think it's really cool that Ezio's voice seems to get deeper throughout this game. It's kind of like a subtle way of showing that significant time is passing. And super cringe, but I kind of wish the girl from Assassin's Creed 2 actually stuck around. I forget her name, but she teaches Ezio how to jump higher in Venice. I don't know, I think she has a really good dynamic with Ezio. And lastly for this section, I did want to break down just a couple of nitpicks from different sequences that I picked up on, but obviously hasn't really negatively impacted my time in the game. It's just stuff that I noticed. So the sequence when you go to Tuscany, you're tasked with taking out a few different high priority targets. Typically in these games, you go on a couple of missions and get the info on who these targets are, and then you just take them out. However, in this section of the game, you kind of just pick off like 5 or 6 of them immediately. It's like churn and burn a little bit. Now, this definitely isn't a complaint because each mission is so unique. Like, for example, one mission has Ezio trying to traverse his way between these tall towers to pick off archers and our main target. But another mission will have you tailing a target to what ends up looking like a grand, overgrown outdoor theater. It's actually really cool. But yeah, I don't know, because it felt super abrupt, I felt like the game just kind of wanted to show off Tuscany and then just get us out of there really quickly. Also, I wouldn't say that Sequence 7 was like a massive period of like padding, because like I said earlier, if it wasn't for Sequence 12 and 13, I feel like the game flows really well. But I do feel like Sequence 7 just kind of slows down for a moment. Like, you learn how to leap jump, which is sick, but it's just doing a bunch of random trivial tasks for your newly acquired friends in Venice. But as I mentioned earlier, the story's strength kind of takes away from the repetitive nature of the missions at this point in the game, and because I'm invested in meeting these new characters, it's not as much of an issue. But here's the biggest point that I really wanted to unpack, and this is actually for Sequence 11. So long story short, you got to tail a courier across Venice, and then you commence a really cool mission where you're disguised as one of the Spaniards' guards, and you have to deliver the Apple of Eden to Rodrigo Borgia himself while staying in formation. There's a much better version of this mission in the next game, but obviously I'll cover that in the Brotherhood video. So you have to face off with Rodrigo, and I think I missed when the game mentions or starts mentioning that there is a prophet that's meant to be at this very specific place at this very specific time. Because Ezio starts asking Rodrigo like where this prophet is, in which Rodrigo claims that he himself is in fact the prophet. So you keep fighting some more, and then literally every single ally that you've made in the whole game across all the cities, except for Katarina, shows up to help you fight, which I think on one hand is really cool, but the fact that they all just kind of pop up out of nowhere at the same time, at the same spot, just seemed a little heavy-handed for the story. I believe this is also where Niccolo Machiavelli is introduced, and you're told that all of your allies have been assassins all along, and have been guiding you to where you are today, and they kind of imply that Ezio is in fact to be this prophet. So I'm going to break this down a little bit more. I told you that this is a bit nitpicky. So I thought it was just kind of a given that your allies were either assassins already or assassin allies, as they clearly know that Ezio is an assassin. And also, if all of these people have been guiding you as assassins, why hasn't anyone told Ezio? He said it himself at the start of this sequence, it's been 10 years since his father and brothers have been murdered. That's a long time to not be telling Ezio that everyone here belongs to the same creed, especially when it serves no purpose except for this dramatic point in the story. Also, this prophet thing, or whatever it is, it seems very specific and convenient. Like, who came up with or prophesized that a prophet would just randomly show up at an exact time at this specific spot in the canals of Venice? Also, lastly, I just want to add that I think it's kind of funny that everyone just performs this leap of faith in this cutscene right at the end of initiating Ezio, I guess. Like, it'd be kind of uncomfortable in some of these threads, and it just seems super random and out of place. But anyway, as I start winding down this video, I've talked about how amazing the character work is in this game, along with the settings and new features. But the largest highlight for me is something I haven't even covered yet. And when I first played Assassin's Creed 2, it actually gave me chills. And of course, what I'm talking about is the story plot of those who came before. This scene is the stuff that I'm talking about when I'm saying that Assassin's Creed 2 just changes everything as a sequel. Like, we had the Apple of Eden in the first game, and we understood that it was an advanced technological artifact that was woven throughout history and its fables. But Assassin's Creed 2 just takes this plot so much further and has Ezio interact with Minerva, who was believed to be a Roman god, or otherwise known to the Egyptians and Greeks as Athena. I mean this in no way to come across like an exaggeration, but when watching this cutscene play out between the two of them under the Vatican for the first time, this is what I imagine it would have felt like watching The Empire Strikes Back at the cinema in 1980 and finding out that Darth Vader was actually Luke Skywalker's father. I don't know, it's really good storytelling. Minerva just keeps looking at us, the audience, when talking to Ezio, and it freaked me the fuck out as a teenager, and even Ezio notices that she wasn't looking at him or speaking in a way that he could really comprehend. And this is when it's revealed that Minerva wasn't actually speaking to Ezio, but was speaking to Desmond through Ezio. And this was just mind-melting. The whole ending sequence between Ezio and Desmond's storylines hooked me and served as the perfect cliffhanger to set up the future titles. But honestly, in hindsight, it's not just this ending in Assassin's Creed 2 that cements this game as a large improvement for me personally, but it's all the moments and features of this game combined. Like, obviously I know that I've kind of shit on this game a little bit in this video, but without trying to sound like a wanky, cliche prick, nothing's perfect. No game is perfect. I personally believe that Assassin's Creed 2 rose the bar for the series and succeeded in building up my excitement for the next title. It successfully incorporated new features, a new protagonist, a new era, and a new setting. But looking back at this game 13 years later, the largest improvement and change in Assassin's Creed 2 is by far the story. And that's the story that's told of Ezio Auditore. I mentioned at the start of this video that I've played this game about 5 or 6 times, and I really can't say that I've done that with any of the other Assassin's Creed titles. This isn't because the game feels better to play or because of its setting. It's literally just because the story of this game is incredible, and not only is the story a significant improvement, but as a sequel, it raises the bar and also sets up the franchise in a much better way than the previous game did. And if there's one last thing I would say about this game, it's the fact that, yes, I may have played this 5 or 6 times before, but I'm sure that playing Assassin's Creed 2 for this video won't be the last time I revisit this title either. And this, my friends, has been my Assassin's Creed 2 video. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you'd like. Goodbye!